going to turn it over to Kristen Carlton, Chief Executive Officer and Head Strategist of All Needs Financial Planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, y'all are so sweet. Thank you. I'm going to pass this around. I'm going to ask for compliance purposes. If you don't want me to contact you, just put your name and don't worry about putting email or phone. Just because I have to give a record for my licensing to say who is actually here. I appreciate that very much. So we're going to talk today about supporting your family with a special needs master plan. And I invite you to start and just think about where you're at and what you've done so far, what your questions are, and what's next for your family. I've got 2 decades of experience in financial markets. I started as a financial planner before my son was born. And then when I was 19 weeks pregnant, found out that he was missing a part of his brain called the corpus callosum. If ever there was a room that might understand like what that means, this is probably it. So when he was 2 weeks old, he had his first seizure, and we're happy to say that he is seizure-free today. And also, you know, as a mom, I'm waiting, hoping that he stays seizure-free for the rest of his life. When I was pregnant, I started to plan for him. There was not much else that I could control, and this was something that I knew and I was familiar with. So I started looking out for the plan. I was that crazy lady who went to the attorney's office and said, hey, I need a special needs trust. And he was like, okay, step 1, he has to be born. So as I started looking around for the planning that he would need, I realized that what a lot of people were saying to me was, hey, it's really your responsibility as the caregiver and mom to put all this together. And you can come to us when you're ready to tell us what to do, but like we really can't. So go out there and find the information that you need. It's all available and you'll compile it all. I was like, I'm sorry, what? There are experts out there that will guide us and give us advice and take us through a process on literally everything else in the world, but not in special needs planning. Makes no sense. And so I started a vision to say, how can we make this easier for families and walk alongside them and show them the resources that we need? So I'll tell you more about that today. I am an advocate, very strong advocate, and working with from local to national levels of impacting policy is really, really important to me. So one of the things that I do is I just stepped onto the board of Commonwealth Savers, which does Able Now, which is the largest Able program in the country, and really working to make change because one of the things with our families, right, is we have a loved one that we know has a disability and will need lifelong care and support. We want to give them the best life that we can give them. And we also want to protect them and make sure that they have access to the supports that they need. Sometimes those two things like really clash. And I would like them to be more interactive and really able to accomplish both. Best life you can possibly get and also access to the supports and solutions that you need. So if you look on here, the timeline of our families is different, right? There are different transitions in our lives that we have to think about and worry about. And some of the biggest ones are the transition to adulthood, where you're out of the school system, you have to think about legal decision-making supports. And there are certain things that you need to do from the government benefits side. The next one I would say is when parents are no longer able to provide the care and may need care themselves. And then the next one, of course, is when parents are no longer here. And we think through all of those transitions with families and put a plan in place. So we're working with families to say, we want you to be cared for, we want you to be protected, and we want you to have room to grow into the future. And we do that by addressing a care plan. We do that by looking at your financial plan making sure that you're taking advantage of all government funding and other sources of funding that are in place. For example, if you have access to a pension, make sure that you're looking at the survivor benefits. So those are some of the things that we're looking at to make sure, like, hey, maybe you don't need to purchase life insurance or as much as you thought. Let's maximize what you already have access to. Then we're looking at those protections. What insurance protections might your family need? What tax efficiencies might your family need, right? You don't want to go through all of this work of making money, of protecting your family, doing all of the things, and then have 30 to 50% of it taken away with taxes. So, and I've seen that happen too often. So we really look at the tax efficiency and the current laws and making sure things are flexible so that as laws change, your plan can flex with it and adapt to new laws. And that is, of course, legal planning, which includes estate planning. It includes decision-making support and any protections that might be necessary from that standpoint. And then, of course, we're looking for you to grow, right? Because your family is not stagnant, and we want you to grow. We want you to have goals, set personal goals. We want every member of the family to have a person-centered plan. We want you to invest towards the future. And we want you to indulge, right? And this is a word that I've found when somebody first said it to me, I felt guilty. And then I've learned to embrace that having some ways that you indulge is okay. You know what? Sometimes the indulgence for me is last night I slept in a hotel room with no little ones to wake me up. You know, I drank my coffee while it was hot. But find those little and big ways that you and your family can indulge together. So we really want to take you out of the mode where you feel like you have to be up late at night researching, looking in the internet, what's out there, and start really enjoying your life. And so we want to help you compile the resources, identify what you need, identify your future goals, and then proactively work towards them. And of course, react and respond to things as they come up, because we can't control everything, and life just comes at us in different ways. So we start with care, and I mentioned this. This is, first of all, a care plan where we're looking at, hey, what are the day-to-day needs of your person with a disability? What are you providing for them? What medications do they take? What specialists do they see? Do they visit? Are there specialists that require travel to get there? And think through from the time they wake up in the morning to the time they go to bed, what are the unique things that they need? And I think about my children, and my goodness, if they don't get like the right kind of sunscreen, our day is ruined. So somebody's got to know that they need spray sunscreen. Somebody's got to know that they have a favorite type of food. I was telling someone this morning that they went 4 weeks and only ate yogurt. Like, when we realized that, I had to backtrack and go, okay, how are we going to widen the diversity of what they're eating? So having somebody that's sort of aware that food might be something that needs to be paid attention to and worked on would be a really important part of your care plan. And then, of course, government benefits, really make sure that you're maximizing funding. And I don't just mean taking supplemental security income, but understanding the relationship between supplemental security income and Social Security disability income is really, really important. I also mean, if you have access to a Medicaid waiver, maximizing the waiver benefits. The truth is that your case manager is not going to come and say, hey, you have access to all these things. Like, it's a menu. Which ones do you want? No, you really have to know what's available and then know what to ask them for and how to ask for it. So, and if you're not on a Medicaid waiver, is this something that is possible? There are many, many families that say, oh, well, we're doing it all ourselves. Like, we don't need that. And I would say, first of all, taking advantage of what is there can be really life-changing for your family. It can take away some of the worry for the future because it'll allow you to save more. but also as your individual grows and gets older, the services that are available outside of the waiver diminish. And so something to really look into very deeply. And then it's financial planning, right? Because we need to know, what does that care plan cost? If you're providing, like the average family experiencing disability provides 40 hours of unpaid labor a week in the family setting. So if you're providing 40 hours of unpaid labor, who else is going to do that if you're not here? And if they need to be paid, what would that cost? And who would pay for it, right? Would it be you, your state? Would it be government benefits? Let's have that plan in place and look at all of the different vehicles that you've set up and make sure that you know, for example, how you're going to spend them from a tax efficiency perspective and how you're going to line everything up so that it benefits you and every single member of your family. I want to put a spotlight on the ABLE account. This is one of my favorite tools in special needs planning, and I know there are a lot of different views of ABLE. I am a huge proponent. The ABLE was enacted by federal legislation, and it basically gave an individual with a disability access to money that they have control over without interfering with their government benefits. So you have probably heard about that $2,000 Medicaid limit, asset limit. So, but you can have up to $100,000 in the ABLE account without impacting your supplemental security income. And if you are on SSDI or not collecting supplemental security income, you can have up to the highest amount, and it differs very state to state. In Virginia, the ABLE now, it's $550,000 today that you could have in there. And again, access to the individual. There are some great things about the ABLE. It has tax benefits. If you are contributing on behalf of the beneficiary, you can, in certain states, get a state tax deduction. So it's a state, not a federal, but sometimes you can get that state tax deduction. You do want to make sure there are some states that have a Medicaid payback, some states that don't. You can put up to $18,000 a year into that ABLE account. And you can roll funds from a 529 into an ABLE account. So if you've started in the 529 and you've said, hey, maybe this isn't the best vehicle for us anymore, you can actually roll $18,000 at a time into that ABLE account. So what can you spend it on? Well, any qualified disability expense. So that includes education, vocational training, includes housing, includes food. It also, when you're looking at qualified disability expense, there are restrictions on what you can spend on primary school. There are no restrictions on what you can spend within the ABLE. So any qualified disability expense that is related to your individual with a disability, you can use the ABLE account to spend on. If you see in there, there is a little visual there that says, hey, okay, you've got an ABLE, you've got your beneficiary, and you also have a special needs trust. Well, here's the benefit. You see that arrow on the top. The special needs trust, now you have a trustee, they can actually move money from the trust into the ABLE account, $18,000 a year. And now the money that's in that ABLE account can be available directly for the person with the beneficiary, for the person with a disability. They can have access to a debit card. You can preload a debit card and say, hey, you're not quite ready to have access to the entire amount that's in this ABLE account, but I do want you to start working on some skills and have some ability to control your own expenses, make decisions. So here's a prepaid debit card linked to the ABLE that has, say, $100 on it. So there's a lot of great ways that you can manage this. So let's talk about within care, what's a financial plan look like? You really need to know, how much does it cost to take care of your loved one? How much does it cost today? How much might it cost in the future? How do we take into account government benefits that would be available, other funding streams? You also need to know, how much are you going to need in retirement, right? What's that look like for you? Let's make sure that we're putting your mask on first. And do you have any other goals? Do you have other children that you want to give money for, specific goals for them? What is their role in this planning? And then look and say, are there any gaps that need to be addressed? So the next section of our plan is protect. And this is where we're looking at insurance to fill any of those gaps that we identified. Also making sure we just understand that some of the risks for our families are greater, right? If you are a wage earner providing for your family and you become disabled yourself and unable to work, that is a bigger risk for your family than it might be for a family without a disabled member. So thinking through those things and understanding them, taking advantage of employee benefits if they're there, that can often be the least expensive way to get access to risk protection. And then tax, when I talk about tax, yes, there's medical deductions annually. That can be tough to get to, 7.5% of adjusted gross income. You've got to be above that. I also mean tax efficiency in your estate planning. So if you're looking at somebody inheriting money through a special needs trust, one of the most tax inefficient vehicles can actually be an IRA. Even with the Secure Act, even with that protection of allowing the stretch, the other problem with that is that many attorneys don't understand the Secure Act, don't understand the specific language that needs to be in there. So I strongly, strongly recommend you find an elder law attorney and make sure that if they don't understand the Secure Act language, they're at least providing flexibility to the trustee to adjust the terms of the trust according to current tax laws. Really, really important. And again, the last thing you want is to have money in there. It's a special needs trust. It's taxed at the highest tax bracket. And now you're paying, whatever the highest tax bracket is at that time on all the money. So, and legal includes decision-making supports as well. I want to highlight special needs trusts. A special needs trust at its core is designed to provide money for the benefit of your loved one with special needs without interfering with their government benefits. So it's essentially a barrier between them and the money that says, hey, they don't have direct access to the funds, but it is for their benefit. So again, going back to, you want to make sure that you have an elder law attorney who really understands what they're doing, because an incorrectly worded special needs trust can make all of those protections null and void. But if it's done correctly and you have your trustee in place and it is funded correctly, you've made sure that the beneficiaries match to the trust, then it can really make a huge difference over their lifetime. So when you're talking about special needs trusts, there's a first-party special needs trust and there's a third-party special needs trust. A first-party special needs trust says, hey, this person has either inherited money directly or they've received money as a result of a settlement or some other means, and they themselves, as a first party, need to put money into a trust to protect their access to government benefits. So you want to use the first party special needs trust as a last resort because there's that Medicaid payback. And that says, hey, the government's gonna allow you to put that money in, but in exchange for allowing you to do that, they're gonna say any money that they spend on you during your lifetime, they're gonna take that back when you pass away. So once they've taken their share, then you can have a beneficiary after that, so the money can stay in your family. In a third-party special needs trust, this says, hey, you have somebody who is not the individual with a disability, so a third party, who is leaving money on their behalf, who has created this trust for their benefit. They don't have access to it directly. It still protects their benefits. But because it was funded by a third party and not the individual themselves, the government's going to allow you to name what's called a remainder beneficiary, which is someone in your family or a nonprofit or a charity who can inherit that money when the individual with special needs is gone. So I'm throwing a lot of information at you. And I would say contact me. We can go over this again. I have classes where I teach people about these kinds of topics if you want to know more. And do your own research as well. So this shows in an ideal environment, this is what we want protections, legal protections to look like, right? We have your loved one with a disability in the middle. They are set up with decision-making support when and if they need it, whether it be a power of attorney, supported decision-making, a micro board, they're set up with that. Parents are protected appropriately. Parents have wills in place. They have medical directives in place. You've thought through who your first power of attorney would be and secondary or contingent power of attorney would be, so you've got some layers in place for when life shifts and changes. And by the way, make sure those power of attorneys are reviewed or redone every 5 years. So here's another one of those weird things. An attorney is going to tell you that power of attorney never expires. It's technically true. It does not expire in a court of law. But a financial firm or a bank generally says 5 years. If it's older than 5 years, we're not going to take it. So you really want those redone every 5 years. And unfortunately, this is not something where, you can get a judge or a court involved and say, no, they have to take it, because the banks and these financial institutions are essentially allowed to set their own guidelines for what they'll accept. So make sure you're taking care of yourselves. Make sure that you know how your funds are designed to go. I've met with too many families who come and say, I've got the special needs trust in place, but it's not funded and there's no accounts that are actually going into the trust. So you got to make sure that you know how everything works together. Have that special needs trust in place. And then a micro board is a great tool for, you've got everything else. Now you're looking at, how do I build a team of support that's not just me? And this can be a great tool if you have a sibling who you want to be involved, but you don't want all of the pressure to be on them, right? Maybe you don't want them to be a trustee. Maybe you don't want them to be guardian, but they still want to have an active role. They can run the micro board. This is a formal board of directors for the benefit of the person with a disability. And what we've found is when you put these in place and you get them running, because of the formal process around it, people start really acting in a proactive way. So they're saying to you, hey, you're taking a vacation upcoming. Have you gotten, the medical insurance that you might need? Instead of you saying to them, hey, we're going on vacation. You see the difference? Like, you're starting to train people to share that mental load with you. And they start to be really proactive and help along. So that microboard is a legally registered entity, and they're also aware of the care plan. So you're training them. You're taking people who are used to maybe interacting with you at holidays and family gatherings, like really fun places, and you're actually training them on the day-to-day needs of your loved one with a disability and saying, like, here's their medications, here are their strengths, and here are their weaknesses. And let's support them together and raise them up. Let's also make sure this microboard can communicate with the trustee to help inform major decisions. So this can be really, really important if you're using a corporate trustee to have a microboard in place that's people that you have some level of control that are on there, because they can communicate. Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. So the question was, who would normally sit on a microboard other than family members? And of course, it usually starts with parents, and you're the ones that are writing the bylaws for this. And then you're looking at siblings, and then you're looking at extended family, but then also you might think about, do you have a financial planner who would be willing to serve on the micro board? Do you have an attorney that might be willing to serve on the micro board? Do you have a favorite therapist that you are either currently working with or have worked with in the past? Is there a religious group that you're involved with, a church or a synagogue? I've actually seen people who their faith is very important to them, and they start hosting potlucks and inviting people to get to know their child. And that's how they end up recruiting their micro board members. So a lot of different ways to approach that. And we work with families, but I would just recommend, if you do it, to identify the areas that you might want represented and then give flexibility to say, this is our goal and our desire, but we're not going to stop the micro board from existing if we can't find that person. So I would recommend anywhere from 2 to 10. And I would also put in there a rule for a tiebreaker. So if you have 5, great. If you have 4, you need to know what happens if you're split vote. Yes. So in general, you don't want the micro board to have control of any money. So, and there are micro boards who will have money, but from a perspective of a court system and who has access, I would recommend putting the money into the trust, having the trustee direct that. You can ask the trustee to fund and pay for micro board members, but it does that's a super gray area of compensation. In general, the professionals that I've talked to are willing to volunteer as long as there are strict guidelines in place that say there's no access to money, and there's a really known way that we're gonna meet, right? We're gonna meet annually or we're gonna meet quarterly, but it's gonna be on Zoom and I know what to expect, of course. All right. Oh, sure.
Just to go back to your previous slide, so what's the roadmap? Like, do family comes in first before going to see a lawyer, and you kind of provide set up this kind of trust? And do you work with lawyers, for example, in terms of wills? Is it the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
First, what's the journey for the family?
It's a great question. So the question was, what's the roadmap? What's the journey? Where do you start? Do you start with me? Do you start with the attorney first? Where do you go? And we do recommend you come to us first. One is that we're not paid by the hour. And we'll help you work through and understand what your goals are before you go to the attorney, so that when you're going to the attorney, you can say, here is exactly what I want. And we'll actually give you an estate map that says, here's how the flow of funds should look, which is really, really helpful for the attorney, because now they know exactly what to do and then can work with you on the legal specifics for your estate.
So it was my next question, is how are you funded?
Yeah, it's also a great question. So first, our initial consultation, our initial first 2 meetings are complimentary. Then you can engage us for what we call the analysis and recommendations. That is a full plan. You leave us with about 20 pages of analysis of your family. That's $3,500. And then if you choose to implement that plan with us, that is really specific to your family and what your needs are, but it's generally working with us as a financial planner and paying a fee on the investments under management.
So you don't have any state funding, or this is all family funded?
That's right. Yeah. Great question. So her question was, we're not state or grant funded, it's family funded, and that is correct. And we are regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission as financial planners. Yes.
You guys take a fiduciary stance?
Yes. So the question was, do we take a fiduciary stance? And yes, we are fiduciaries. And not if you go through life insurance with us, that is not done on a fiduciary level, just because life insurance doesn't really work that way. But any of the financial planning would be fiduciary standard. Great question. So decision-making support, you've probably had other areas, other sessions where you've really gone into this more in depth. This is something that we work with families on is decision-making support needed? And then where are you on that spectrum of needing support? And this is an area that is growing, and we think supported decision-making is the wave of the future. It's what I want for my son, he's 4. It's also, there are some limitations right now from a legal standpoint in state to state. Some states, it's not recognized. If you go to court and hospital settings, it can be very difficult, even if it is accepted, to explain what it is. There hasn't been enough education yet. But this is also something that we work with families on is how it would work and what you have access to in those different types of decision-making support. So, and lastly, I said, this is my favorite part, is let's look at what every member of your family needs for growth. Let's put together a person-centered plan for each person. Let's look at investing. Let's look at how to maximize the money that you have and set you up for the future. Let's look at indulging and taking a vacation, right? What's holding you back from doing this? Are there supports that we can put in place so that you can go to the gym or do things that seemed inaccessible for your family? We're looking at all of those things. And personal goals and hobbies and taking care of yourself, right? Go to the dentist. Might not be fun, but I want to see you doing it. Really take care of yourself, make that a priority. So I do want to put just a spotlight on dividend investing. This is something I think is really important for our families. It minimizes the risk of your portfolio by putting less pressure on returns because you're starting with that dividend yield. But it also sets you up so that if you can do this where in your retirement you're living off of dividends and interest, you can allow that principal to grow for the next generation that's going to need it, right? For your loved one with special needs. And so again, it just takes less pressure off on the portfolio, allows you to take less risk over time and really build towards the financial future that your family needs. So our team, we are a team of moms. You may have actually seen Mary McDermott. She's presented here in the past. And Dr. Kathy Matthews is our Director of Family Services. So I tell her she's our secret sauce because when you work with us long-term, you get full access to Kathy in applying for government benefits, in maintaining a good relationship with your case manager, in making sure that you're able to access the supports that your family needs every single step of the way, and transitioning to independent life for your loved one with a disability, finding the right housing supports and solutions, making sure that it's a good fit, monitoring it over time, making sure that you know what monitoring you can put in place. She has been known to show up at people's place of housing unannounced just to do a check. So some of the things that we do with families. And we put together your special needs master plan. You start with a strategy session. We move through, I told you about the analysis and recommendations. Then we implement, we invest. We're proactively approaching all of those life transitions that we started in that beginning talking about that are unique for our family. And then we're ongoing, putting strategy in place and monitoring the plan, adjusting as necessary. So we give you a document at the end of the analysis and recommendations. We look at that as a living, breathing thing. It's constantly changing, it's being added to, because none of us are static, right? My life doesn't look today like it did 5 years ago, and it's certainly not going to look the same 5 years from now. And so we need that ongoing proactive planning. So a lot of ways to engage with us. We're on social media. We have a private Facebook group called All Needs Community, and I would invite you to join us there. A lot of great information on there. We share with other families and provide education and resources there. We have a free class that you can access through our website, our special needs master class with a lot of reports on there. And then every Friday from 12 to 1, we do office hours where you can sign up on Zoom, come, there's no charge, just ask any questions that you want. So again, we are moms and we want to make this as accessible as possible to the community. Sign up today, get a complimentary consultation. You'll actually meet first with Mary McDermott, and she will learn all about your family and get you started on your special needs master plan. If you do that, you'll also get an hour of advocacy with Dr. Kathy Matthews. So just a great way to get you started in the process. So the QR code is the best way to do that, but you can also go to our website and hit the contact us and we'll get right in touch with you. That same QR code is there. You can also email me. That's our main office phone number there. We would love to work with you in any way and help your family. Sure.
You had mentioned to refresh a POA every 5 years. If you have a guardianship in place, is that relevant?
No. The refresher POA would be for you. So if you have a power of attorney for in case you're incapacitated, you would refresh that. The guardianship is different. Yeah. Great question. Yes.
Hi, I'm already a client, got married at this conference 2 years ago.
Awesome.
Huge fan. So I think we're in a good place on a lot of the stuff that the parents need to do. I wonder if you guys have anything or thinking about doing anything for sort of our young adult children. Like I have luxury of my daughter might actually be able to manage a lot of this stuff. I don't want to send her to some, random other, entity that sort of how to train her in her own financial management.
Yeah.
And, don't want to put her in front of just any random entity. Do you have anything along those lines for the special needs young adults?
That's a great question. So the question was, do we have anything in place for special needs young adults? And right now the answer is not really. What we're doing is we're working with them kind of one-on-one and setting up a plan that makes sense. And it depends on how we're looking at it, right? So I have some self-advocates that I'm working with where we've just set it up where we're touching base quarterly and checking in and seeing what they're struggling with and what they need to work through. I have other special needs self-advocates where we're actually managing the money for them, right? Like they've inherited money and they need help, but they're not on government benefits. And we treat them really just like we would a traditional client, with the exception of Dr. Matthews is in every meeting. Dr. Matthews is actually a licensed special education teacher. And so we're working on how does this person learn? How do we communicate effectively? What are their needs? And what protections might they need in place that they're fully on board with, they're fully making the decision to make sure that they can access those funds when they need them, and they're also protected in areas they might be vulnerable. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes. Yeah. Oh.
In the same angle, do you guys act as a trustee?
So not at this time. That is something we are working towards, where we could act as trustee or have a trust company, but we're not there today. Our company is about a year old, so future goals. A great question. The question was, can we act as trustee? Answer is not yet. Yes.
Can you share a little bit about what
Absolutely. So the question was, what's the time and capacity that families need to put into the initial process to receive that analysis and recommendations? And so it's 4 meetings. Sometimes that can turn into 6 meetings depending on what the family needs and what questions they have. But in general, we're asking you to commit to 4 meetings. We are sending you a checklist where we're asking you to gather all of the information that would be relevant to the plan so that we can review that. Any legal documents, any employee benefits, really anything relevant to your financial and legal and support planning. We're also asking for, copies of IEPs and things like that. So you'll have a little bit of homework after each meeting. But we're trying to break it down into a manageable process. And we have some families who are like, they're on a roll, they do those 4 meetings and they're done 4 weeks later. It's not the norm. The norm is that it takes about 90 days. Absolutely. Yes.
Our daughter is kind of, we're uncertain about the level of support she needs if she turns 18.
Mm-hmm.
And are there resources to help make that decision about, does she need guardianship?
That is a great question. The resources vary state to state. I will say there is a lot of discussion about decision making, and the best guidance that I can give you is that you can always, it's easier to start off with the lowest level of support and then increase it than it is to start with guardianship or decision making. So, or guardianship or conservatorship. So, I would start off and say, get a power of attorney in place, because without that power of attorney, you're not going to be able to help with any medical decision making or have access to any records. So the second that she turns 18, you'll lose access to all of that. That's where I would start, and then you can grow towards there. But yeah, does that answer your question? Okay. Yes.
We're here in Boston, I think you're in Virginia, it sounds like.
I am.
Isn't Mary in Washington State?
She is.
So it's all done through Zoom meetings.
That's right. That's right. So
And you have the ability to work with anyone, anywhere in the United States.
Mhm.
Correct also?
That's right. All 50 states. Yep. So the question was, how do we engage with clients? Is it virtual or in person? And the answer is virtual. And then can we help clients in any location in the United States? And the answer is yes, we can work with clients in all 50 states. We are not licensed to do business outside of the US. Yes.
Just a question of one, the more educated parents are, the better off will be when they come to someone like you guys. Is there any type of books and or websites that you would suggest we peruse before really making our way down the street?
That's a great question. The ARC actually has some great resources about financial and legal planning. One thing I would tell you is there's a lot of information out there, and I would always just think, I would always just want to think, how are they benefiting from this information, and who's providing it, and what are the fees that you're paying to them? Because usually anyone that's providing the information is tied to the fee. So knowing that fiduciary, are they tied to the compensation, all of those questions, I would keep that front of mind. But yeah, I would say that the ARC is a good place to start.
That's a website.
Yeah, don't know the exact site, but it's the ARC, and there's a national website. It does talk about financial planning and legal planning. Yes.
I'm curious about the logistics to get money in an able account. So you said you could move it from a 529. Does that count towards like an 18,000? Is it 18,000 you can go in, or do you call it a rollover? Is that like, can I do 50 cash in one time and still do 18,000? I'm just curious about the logistics.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the question is, if you're moving money from a 529 to an ABLE account, what's the limitation? And the limitation is 18,000 at a time over a year, and they'll only allow you to do one over a 12-month period. So you can't set it up so that like, hey, I'll move $1,500 a month over the course of a year.
Is Virginia a state that has tax benefits for the ABLE account?
Yeah, so the question is, does Virginia have tax benefits for the ABLE account? And the answer is yes. So you get a $2,000 state tax deduction if you...
Theoretically, it actually go to, okay, never mind, I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Okay, I think we've run out of time. So appreciative to all of you. I think we have to clear out the room pretty quickly. So I'll just gather my things and I'll be standing outside the door if you have any additional questions. Thank you so much.